Right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast. We are your weekly look into the wide, wacky, wonderful world of mixed martial arts. My name is Robert Winfrey, and I am your host, per usual. Boy, UFC 321. That's what's going to take up the lion's share of this podcast because we're going to review that. We're going to preview UFC on ESPN 120, which is a terrible card. And yeah, I don't actually have any news that I've seen that, man, you got the feeling they were kind of waiting for 321 to like drop a little bit of news, but so something will probably come out Monday, but that's a whole other thing. But then, the way 321 went, there was like not the atmosphere or time to do a bunch of news dropping, so, it's where we are. So that's kind of what we got at the moment. Yeah, so anywhere you can interact with the product is always appreciated. Like, comment, subscribe, star rating, written review. Mostly just thank you for listening, because that really is the most important thing. All right, let's jump into this, shall we? All right. UFC on ESPN, excuse me, UFC 321. Predictions. So a couple of things. I completely spaced. I don't know if I just missed it on the rundown or whatnot last week when I previewed the Jacqueline Amarim and Mizuki Inoue fight. So I picked Mizuki mostly because I just picked the underdog there because I didn't do it publicly beforehand. I'm not always going to do that, but I also swapped both of my picks on the guys who missed weight because I've always had it is my prerogative what to do if a fighter misses weight. I'm no longer bound to what I say here if that happens at weigh-ins. But it just felt weird. So I went with Mizuki, expecting to eat it, and then she won. So yeah. What else did we do? We lost the fight between Camilo and Al Sawadi. Nothing of value was lost there. Ultimately went 10-2 with a no contest. Main event was a no contest. Missed. What did I miss? I missed Salkilled, who just killed Nasrat Haqparast. Jeez. The other one, yeah, I mentioned before. Like I took the big flyer on Chris Barnett and knew it was stupid, but was kind of taking a principled stance on that one. Everything else, again, I swapped to Raposo after Maxim missed weight. Um, Not by a whole lot, but I don't know. It rubbed me the wrong way. Something about it. My logic for switching to Wood after Jose Miguel Delgado missed weight was a lot more solid. Um, Delgado's real good, but if you botch your weight cut to the point where you're only missing by that much, but you can't cut the last little bit, that means you've actually like really tried. You got fairly close, but couldn't get there, and that's a bad place to be against Nathaniel Wood because Wood has ups and downs at featherweight, and we'll get into it when we get into the fight. But the reasoning here was Wood's super tough, and if you're dealing with having to fight after a bad weight cut, if you don't actually get him out of there in the first round, you're gonna slow down, and he's gonna punish you for it. And that's kind of what happened. I still thought Delgado won the fight, for the record. I scored it for him. I don't hate scoring it for Wood, but that was my logic in the swap there. Yeah, and everything else wasn't super. Dude, I stuck with Volkov. By the time we got to that point, I was like, okay. I stuck with Volkov, and then nice to see him win that one, sort of. We'll get to it. Yeah. Again, the rest of it wasn't super. None of the rest of it was super wonky. So Again, 10, 2, and 1 no contest. So year to date, that's now 327, 109, and 2 with 3 no contests. Yeah, I'm okay with that. I think my goal next year, if I'm super serious about this, my goal next year will to be like less than 100 wrong. That's a Given the number of fights, it's actually a big ask. I mean, I'm at 109. We've still got like 2 months. How many more events are there this year, actually? Hang on. Let me check that. So to cap off the year, we have 4 in November and then 2 in December. So we have 6 more events. And that's what? How many per event? I mean, this is going to change a little bit, but just hypothetically. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So 13. If 13's become the average, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26. Yeah, it looks like it has. 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39. 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 51. Good grief. 52, 53, 54. Why is that one so stacked? 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, 60, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And 69, 70, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's no, so 76 right now. That last card does not look fully fleshed out yet, actually. It's only got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, that one only has like 8 fights on it right now. So we're looking at, call it 80 fights left on the year, give or take. Plus or minus, what, 4? So that's not enough for things to go completely sideways for me at this point, but man, that's still a lot of fights. So if I'm serious about, they do what, 42 events a year is what they're contracted for? 13. Average of 13 fights a card. Just say 40. Let's go 43 for the sake of argument. So 43 times 13. So you're looking at 560, 559. Again, some of these are going to fall out and move around, but call it 550, 560 for the sake of argument, and potentially easy math. So if I really want to go less than 100 missed, I don't know. That's something to think about if I want to set a goal. All right, anyway, moving on. That's enough yammering. As for UFC 321, let's get to the fights. Main event, Tom Aspinall and Cyril Gane goes to a no contest at 4:35 of the first round. There was an accidental eye poke to Tom Aspinall. He could not continue. Fight waved off, and here we are. Let me talk about the fight itself first, then I'll talk about the aftermath. Couple of things. Cyril Gane mostly fighting southpaw. I think was a good choice. Tom hasn't fought a lot of Aspinall has not fought a lot of southpaws. Gane's jab is better out of southpaw, and it landed a few times and like busted up Tom's nose. Gane, a few things I should have seen coming when I did not give this like some super deep preview. I should have given a little more attention, but few things that Gon does that kind of messed with Aspinall. Not to say that he was definitively going to lose this fight. Okay, we were just about at the end of the first round. There's four more left. This is heavyweight, but here's what was giving Aspinall problems. Dealing with another heavyweight who could move with him. A lot of Aspinall's success against other guys comes from the fact that he is very light on his feet, especially for a big man. Blitzes very quickly, has very good power. Very good wrestler, very good like jiu-jitsu guy too. Not the best takedown artist at heavyweight, but some of the physicality at heavyweight also means you don't have to be a super elite guy to get decent takedowns. So Cyril Gahn moves very well, again, especially for a man his size. And he could move with Aspinall. Denied Aspinall some of the angles he likes to take on his attacks. Was not a stationary target for him. And those are conditions that really let a lot of what Aspinall does shine. The jab, the southpaw jab from Gahn was definitely giving Aspinall some problems. It's a thing that you can adjust to, but Aspinall likes countering an orthodox jab. He will blitz, as you jab, he'll blitz, starting with like a right hand lead. Come over the top with that, and then it leads into the rest of what he does. Because you throw a jab, and he's so quick, especially relative to his peers, that he just blitzes in. Suddenly he's right on top of you, and he's hitting you with like 3 punches, and you don't know what to do. Gahn took that away with the movement, with the jab, because you have to fight a southpaw jab differently than an orthodox jab. And he kept showing, both men kind of showed the lead leg side kick to the knee. It's more relevant for Gahn. He's a little bit more dexterous with the right leg than Aspinall is with his left, a little bit. And Gahn not quite the blitzer that Aspinall is. And if somebody's sticking a side kick or a stop kick or whatever into your knee, that really makes blitzing not impossible, but really, really difficult. And Aspinall was having some problems. Nothing that couldn't be fixed, nothing that he couldn't adjust to. I'm not sitting here saying he was definitely going to lose the fight. He was losing the round. That's the reality of it. Now, there were still, 25 seconds left. Either guy could have landed a good, solid punch. If somebody gets dropped, then who's winning that round shifts immediately. It was that close. There were ways that Aspinall could have done something to win back the round in the last 30-ish seconds. It's not impossible, but he was losing that round. Doesn't mean he wasn't having success. A couple of times when Gahn would go orthodox, he landed a pretty solid calf kick, which is a good weapon against Gahn. Anyone who moves a lot, good calf kicks will mess with that. He also landed a few right hands. It's not that his blitzes were completely eliminated by Gahn. They were just complicated and somewhat mitigated. And they still occurred on occasion, and he landed punches. But Cyril Gahn has a really good chin. I mean, he got bombed on by Tai Tuivasa and kind of just bounced back up. Francis Ngannou couldn't get him down with punches. Francis Ngannou probably never really bothered him with punches when they were training together. Because if that were the case, somebody would have brought it up when they were hyping up their fight. Like, no, in training, he would drop Gahn or whatever. Like, didn't get brought up. He trained with that guy, so he's tough. He moves well like Aspinall does. He's got a good southpaw stance with a dexterous lead leg and a strong jab. And he's durable, got a really good chin. And we've seen him fight 5 rounds. We've seen him fight deep into fights. We haven't seen that out of Aspinall. there's still a bit of an open question about him. Like, whether or not a bunch of his success is sort of just like because he's able to do stuff really quickly in short order. We don't know what he looks like into the latter half of the second round even, much less rounds 3, 4, or 5. And looked like we were going to get some of those were going to be addressed, some of those questions here. Now, that once again, that does not mean he was going to lose. Dropping a close round, and this was dropping a close-ish, a competitive, certainly, dropping a competitive first round in a title fight is not at all a death sentence or a guarantee of loss. But he was losing that round. And I was interested. Like, it was kind of just starting to get going. And then Gane throws a little bit of a body kick. It's partially blocked by Aspinall. And Gane reaches out with his left hand and, trying to frame into the face or whatnot, pokes Tom Aspinall in the eyes. Aspinall's right eye reacts very badly. He gets, time to recover, and at about the 4-minute mark and a little bit of change, he reiterates, I can't see. Now, in theory, there's still another minute for him to potentially recover, but at that point, this is I'm not saying another 60 seconds to potentially recover is nothing, but if you're still reacting that badly, and especially if, and he's the one who would know this, if it doesn't feel like it's actually moving towards recovery, at that point another 60 seconds isn't really going to help. Like, if you have not felt that what the foul, like you're recovering from the foul in a reasonable time frame through the first 4 minutes, there's not a lot of reason to believe that the fifth and final minute is going to get you to a point where suddenly you're okay to continue. So, this is the first UFC title fight to end in a no contest in the cage. Only one other one has actually been ruled a no contest. It was the second fight between John Jones and Daniel Cormier. It was ruled that way after the fact. UFC titles have a weird relationship with no contest. There have been a few others that maybe should have. Couple come to mind, actually. There's a lightweight title fight between Sean Shirk and Hermes Franca. Nobody likes to talk about it because nobody likes Sean Shirk, and Hermes Franca is words that I'm not going to say on the podcast. Feel free to look it up if you're so inclined. But nothing good. So nobody likes to remember that, but Sean Shirk wins a unanimous decision. Then after the fight, both Shirk and Franca failed drug tests. Shirk contested his a little bit and got a slightly stiffer punishment because of it. His defense was a little bit weird too. Like, most of what he was arguing was like proper or improper handling, which would work very well in like a legalistic defense, but you're not actually like arguing points of law and procedure a lot of the time when you argue the stuff for an athletic commission. You're not dealing with judges. You're dealing with executive appointees. You're dealing with bureaucrats. And much as you might think, don't bureaucrats like procedure and whatnot? Well, not. There's a world of difference between a bureaucrat and a litigator, or that kind of thing. And it's weird, but it's true. So, anyway, both failed drug tests. So Shirk wound up being stripped of the belt. BJ Penn beat the crap out of Joe Stevenson, one of the bloodier fights you might find, to win the vacant belt. Then he beat the crap out of Sean Shirk to retain it, because at that point, dude, that era of BJ Penn is no joke one of the best fighters you will ever see. Not perfect or anything, but seriously one of the most special fighters. That obviously didn't hold forever. It never does, but anyway. But the result of that fight was not changed. I imagine because they both failed drug tests, they just kind of went, sure, the result can stand. But in theory, I don't know, just in theory. Um, then there was the fight between, I think it was Randy Couture and Josh Barnett. Barnett wins the title, fails a drug test. The belt, I think, goes back to. Belt doesn't default back to Randy. The belt's held up, but the result isn't changed. It's either that or that's the one where he failed but kept the belt and the result wasn't changed. There was something weird about that. So there's a few others that maybe could have wound up in this same boat that just didn't for random reasons over time. Anyway. Um, UFC said they want to rebook this in somewhat short order. Dana White was not pleased for obvious reasons. Dana White's also a little bit pissed at Tom Aspinall and his dad. Because during the last little bit in the build-up to this fight, Aspinall's father said, yeah, he's got, 3-ish fights left with the UFC, and I don't think he should re-sign with them. I think he should be done with this after that, and then go to boxing. Which is a plan, if he wants to. I'm not sitting here saying that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Aspinall's actual boxing needs a lot of work if he wants to go that route, but it's possible to fix. But, the UFC never likes that. So Dana just, not happy all the way around. Um, the post-fight broadcast featured luminaries, Chael Sonnen and Anthony Smith, saying, we kind of think Aspinall should have just kept fighting. You're the world, you're the heavyweight champion. You've got to be prepared to fight with one eye. And oy vey, this bothers me. First of all, if you're one of the people who think that eye poke wasn't very bad, I will grant you that I've seen worse. Sure. But if you're under the impression that the only way to damage the eye is like touching the actual eyeball, and because his eyes were closed, that may not have been that bad, do me a favor. I'm going to like talk you through something here real fast. I'm going to ask that anyone listening who wants to do this, please don't be stupid. Okay? Seriously, don't be stupid about this. But if you want to look at like what the eye poke was and kind of how it played, close your eye. In the case of Aspinall, it was his right eye, but you could do this with either. Close your eyes. Take your finger, put it on top of your eyelid, just under the eyebrow. Kind of, you can feel like where the bone is there, and there's that little space under the, little bit of a gap there between the eyeball and the top of the brow. That's kind of where we're going. Put your finger in the middle of that, and just kind of push a little. Not very hard, just a little. And see how long it takes that to be deeply uncomfortable. Now, once you get to the point where it's a little bit uncomfortable, kind of like you're kind of pushing back and then like you're trying to get behind it and scoop it out is the motion that's going on there. Then when you get to the point where that's not feeling very pleasant, kind of just like pull down and out. Just straight down from where you are, and it's really unpleasant. Now that's you doing it to yourself with safety guards in place, hopefully, your own intelligence and whatnot, your own sense of self-preservation. That's really not pleasant. You want to know why? I can actually tell you a little bit about this. Because when you get back there, partially what you're affecting, is the musculature that controls your eye. Like, there's a lot of stuff around your actual eyeball that's really important to maintaining it. And if you mess with that, it can be really bad. If you think the only way to mess with the eye is to actually like touch the organ, no, there's a lot of ways to mess with what's going on there. So this is a very, and actually like getting kind of in the middle of that back there. You're like right at the apex of some really gnarly stuff anatomically. So should be leaving that alone. Now, the point that here's again, you have both these guys, both Aspinall and Smith, or excuse me, both Sonnen and Smith, opining that this was just the move of a quitter, basically. Anthony Smith, noted for, you know, taking damage and just curling up into the fetal position near the end of his career. And Chael Sonnen, noted incredibly dirty fighter who never held a UFC title. Um, Here's the thing. I freely acknowledge that all physical sporting endeavors exist in this weird spot where you are never going to perform consistently under ideal circumstances at peak physicality, peak physical health. Not going to happen. Any number of things. This is doubly true in combat sports. And MMA in particular because there's a lot. There's just a lot. I mean, there's a long-running joke in like the Muay Thai community that if you do it for a while, if somebody asks how you are, you're like, yeah, the first like inch, half an inch to an inch of my body is just in constant pain or dead to sensation. Um, so dealing with adverse conditions is sort of a given. It is an inevitable part of the experience. It's one of those things you can't get rid of. The questions arise when, what exactly are we going to do? Which conditions get us to a point where the fight should not progress? Or maybe shouldn't, be booked at all, falls apart, etc. There's a few of these that everyone just agrees upon. You get exceptions. You get individual performances that might go against this, but as a general rule, if you blow out your knee, especially depending on like how close it happens to a fight, like okay, knee injury, everyone kind of just goes, okay, sucks, but it happens. Um, the fact that Dana White got pissy at Jose Aldo for not fighting with busted ribs at one point has put the rib thing in an iffy spot. But if you've never had injured ribs, believe me, they suck. There's supposed to be elasticity there. It hurts to breathe when your ribs are messed up because your rib cage expands and contracts in time with your breathing. So just everything goes wrong there. But there's guys who will fight with broken hands. You really shouldn't. There's a lot of that. So there's a bunch of stuff that if somebody comes out and says, this happened to me, fight cannot continue, and we all kind of go, yeah, that sucks. We were looking forward to the fight, usually, but we understand. And there's the stuff that happens in the cage, and this is where things get into a little bit more of a gray area. Now, the point that Chael Sonnen made that sometimes you're going to have to fight with one eye. There is a degree of truth to this. It's also slightly being like misapplied. The reality is when you fight, you're going to get punched in the face. Someone who knows what they're doing is going to punch you in the eye. That's going to compromise your vision. If you fall apart physically every time you are legally struck in the eye, your career is not going to go super far. There are legal techniques and those are legal targets. You have to figure out how to deal with that. That's true. That said, if you get hit in the eye and it's bad, you might say, okay, I can't see, fight's over. That's a choice you have to make. But again, there are perfectly legal ways to go about this. The expectation that a fighter is just going to soldier on through you know, potentially very painful debil. Look, if Tom Aspinall says he can't see out of his right eye, and his right eye wouldn't even open for the longest time, it was closed. Again, there's muscles around there, control eye movement and your eyelids, and if they get hit really hard or even moderately hard, they can spasm. And they just, even if even if there's no damage to the eyeball itself, even if once you get your eye to open, you're okay, if that spasm lasts too long, you can't fight like that. So, but again, the expectation that, oh, you got fouled. Well, this is a dirty sport. Just deal with it. The number of fighters right now, boy, if you talk to especially retired guys about their eyesight, ooh boy, it ain't good. There's serious ramifications for this stuff. Your eyes are not one of those things you can mess around with. And I'm not going to get mad at Tom Aspinall for saying this foul debilitated me to the point where I couldn't continue the fight in safe conditions. No, again, nor should he be like shamed for this. He got fouled pretty clearly. It sucks. This was bitterly disappointing. I don't think, for whatever you want to say about the following, I don't think Cyril Gahn was out there trying to poke Tom Aspinall in the eye. I think he was trying to frame off the face, which is a thing you can do. It is perfectly legal. There's just ways to do it that minimize the risk of of eye pokes. The one Jack Slack mentioned. Israel Adesanya and Brad Tavares. It's a 5-round fight, plenty of footage. Adesanya constantly frames off of Tavares' face. But if you look at what he does with his hand, the hand position kind of makes sure that the fingers are not really going to go into the eyes. So it's a thing that can be worked on, but I don't know. So again, there's a lot of people who have kind of done the thing about this after the fact. Dude, Dana White just going, yeah, eye pokes happen. I don't know what you want us to do. My man, 90% or more of the yearly revenue yearly revenue generated by the entire sport of mixed martial arts globally is done by the UFC. 90 cents of every dollar that is generated by the sport of MMA in a given year is generated and goes to the UFC. You have a responsibility at that point. If you want to be a big-ass monopoly, and you are, there's stuff that has to go with that. The NFL is a protected monopoly. There's considerations that they have to adopt because of it. And the UFC at the moment tries to be a giant monopoly and also abdicate 90% of the responsibility for everything that goes on in the sport. It's not us, it's the commissions. We don't control the rules, the commissions do the rules. We don't control blah, 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 blah. Just over and over and over again. The abdication of responsibility. You want to be in the position that you're in, where you are like far and away the only MMA source. There's other promotions out there. You subsidize a giant chunk of the American regional scene. A lot of it. It's not that there's no other MMA promotions in the world. There are. But I think the only ones that actually do consistently good business are like KSW and Octagon. Again, you've got other ones that do business. They're profitable. They work. Cage Warriors. And there's a couple in the States that still are around. Um, there's a few in different places in Africa. I think EFC is still around in like South Africa. The LFA still runs. Like there's still, but I mean, one is basically out of the MMA business. Um, so you can get a bunch of smaller ones that technically exist, but they kind of just scrape by financially for the most part, and nobody cares about the vast majority of them. KSW and Octagon are regional to like Eastern Europe, Poland, Germany, those locations. They do good business there. They actually will do stadium shows on occasion. But they don't go outside their region. And that's okay. They're making money, they're existing, they are benefiting the MMA ecosystem. But if the UFC in general wants to be we're it, and they are, there should be responsibilities that come with that. There really should. And they like to abdicate those to any and all other potential things that they can throw those away to, and then try to claim successes for all of them when they can get those, because they're just trying to live like the toddler logic. Oh, it didn't go my way, it's not my fault. It went great, it's all me, nobody else contributed, for the most part. And the reality is, the gloves that Pride used did a really good job of mitigating eye pokes. They still happened on occasion. There's some degree to which you're never going to get away from them completely unless you radically redesign the gloves. And you're not really going to do that because, bear in mind, when I say radically to completely remove eye pokes, that what you'd wind up doing is almost like you would neuter giant chunks of the grappling. So, again, there's still things they could do. Remember, they trotted out the new glove design a little bit back, and then they kind of panicked because the TKO rate dropped for 4 or 5 events in a row, and then they went, no, we're going back to the old ones, partially because John Jones didn't like the new ones. I joke partially, but man. So the UFC is doing nothing to try and fix this. And because there's nothing that's going to force them to. Fan pressure will only do so much when the fans are the third consideration. The hierarchy of things the UFC cares about is 1, pleasing their broadcast partners, 2, pleasing whatever government agencies are paying them to run shows in those locations, and then third is maybe the fans. That's it. CBS, Paramount is about to give them about $1 billion a year for 7 years. And tourism boards or state places or whatever the appropriate government agency is in different states and in different countries pay them to bring the circus to town. They don't actually care what you think of that product. You are down the list of priorities for them, noticeably. So your frustration with this, I'm not going to say carries absolutely zero weight, but it is down the list of things that they care about. Until those two entities put pressure on them, they're not going to change anything. And fighters are below the fans, technically. So that's where we are. That's just where they have insulated themselves from all of this crap. So they're not going to do anything. Again, a lot of people are mentioning that, it's not really that hard to not poke someone in the eye. And again, there's ways to frame and push that severely limit or mitigate the risk of getting a finger into someone's eye. Part of the problem is I think a lot of people just don't want to train it, don't want to deal with it. You got so much other crap to do that, okay, let's spend a while learning how to frame properly, learning how to press properly. So you're not going to poke anyone in the eye. You kind of go, if it happens, it happens. I get a warning. Who cares? Well, it might matter if you're in a title fight and the champion then can't continue despite the fact that you were doing pretty darn well. Yeah, dude, Cyril Gane's about to enter a weird space. You know how many guys have gotten a third crack at the UFC belt after failing, a fourth shot at a UFC title after failing to win it 3 times? Because I could only find one, and it's weird. That's Joseph Benavidez. So if you don't remember this one, Joseph Benavidez lost a bantamweight title fight in the WEC, which I'm not counting for the sake of this because this is only UFC stuff. Lost a bantamweight title fight in the UFC to Dominic Cruz. Then comes to the UFC, winds up going to flyweight. He loses the inaugural flyweight title fight to Demetrius Johnson. He gets a rematch with Demetrius Johnson a little bit and gets knocked out cold. Several years go by. Demetrius Johnson loses to Henry Cejudo. Henry Cejudo vacates. Benavidez winds up fighting for the vacant belt with Davison Figueiredo. Figueiredo misses weight and then stops Benavidez. I believe that was with strikes. So they rebooked the fight because Figgy missed weight and there was still no champion. He missed weight and then won the fight. So Benavidez gets a fourth crack at the flyweight belt after losing the first 3. Because even though Figueiredo was not eligible to win the belt in that fight with Benavidez, Benavidez would have won the title if he'd won the fight. And then Figgy beats him again. And that's kind of it. Like, Faber had a few. Faber's was weird. If Faber went 0-3, because he lost one to Cruz, he lost one to Barao, he lost to Cruz again. I don't think he had a fourth, though. Might have been an interim one in there somewhere. I don't remember, but he only had 3. I think Pedro Hizzo went 0-3 in UFC title fights. Technically, Chael Sonnen went 0-3 because he got that weird one against John at light heavyweight. Waste of everyone's time. Jeez, who else? Yeah, I mean, again, there's a few that if you want to get like in the Wayback Machine, you might start finding. But as a general rule, like again, getting more than one title shot is hard. Getting a third is really hard. Getting a fourth after that, like the fact that this went to a no contest and was in the circumstances of it are what's going to potentially give Gane the shot. But he's entering some weird space because he's now failed to win the belt 3 different times. He lost to Ngannou, put up a good fight, but lost. He fought very, very stupidly and got run over by John Jones. And now fouled his way out of a fight that was going his way. I don't know what to do with that. And then I feel bad for both guys. I really look. Gane is the one who did the best case scenario, call it negligent, was negligent with his weapons. Aspinall sat out for 400 days waiting for this fight, basically. I mean, he won the interim belt, then we're like, hey, gonna fight John, and then that didn't come about for timing, and I think there was a minor injury to Aspinall in there somewhere. Then John beats old man Stipe. And we're like, all right, should be Aspinall. He's not only won the interim belt, he defended it, and that kind of just dragged on and dragged on and dragged on, and then John retired. And so, yeah, the dude sat out for over a year waiting for the John Jones thing. And then he finally gets back, and you get poked in the eye in the first round, and fights off. That is some bad luck. That is some really, really bad luck. So I don't know. They're going to try to rebook it. This was supposed to be the heavyweight division kind of getting back to normalcy. It really was. Like, it's been in a weird spot for a while. Let's be upfront about the following. Um, this division has been a little bit wonky since Ngannou left. Now, Ngannou's relationship with the UFC made it a little bit wonky before he left, but he was the undisputed champion when he left. And since then, it's been weird. Like, let's just run through this, because again, it's just weird. Um, so yeah, again, Gon beats Derek Lewis for the interim belt. Then he loses to Ngannou in Ngannou's first title defense after he beat Stipe. Then Ngannou stripped of the belt when he left the UFC. John Jones. Okay, let's just take a minute and appreciate the following. So Ngannou beats Gon to retain the belt um, August of 21. I think was the date for that fight. Or is that when he won it? No, 22 was when he beat Gon. Okay, sorry, I'm reading this chart wrong. So January of 22, he leaves January, so nothing happens to that belt for a full year until January of 23. Now, his knee was shot, like his knees were trashed in that going into that fight, so he got that fixed. Like, I'm not begrudging the guy. I'm just saying nothing happened with the belt for a year. Then in March of 23, John beats Gon. John doesn't fight again until he beats old man Stipe November of 24. So you're like 18 months between title fights in the heavyweight division for the undisputed belt. Aspinall defeats Sergey Pavlovich for the interim belt November of 23. Then he defends it in July of 24. So his last fight was July of 2024. He doesn't fight again until October 25th, this most recent one, of 2025. Again, 400 plus days. Dude, this is supposed to be one of the premier belts. Like, heavyweight is one of the divisions that everyone's like supposed to care about. What are we doing here? Like, man, John Jones must just curse belts that he hands back. I don't know how or what, but like, look what happened to light heavyweight after he left. It was a clown fiesta. Like, we got some good fights, don't get me wrong. But that belt was, okay, I won it, and now I got injured, so I vacate. And then this guy won it but couldn't defend, and then gets injured, and then gets stripped of it, and then there was a lot of that. For like a while. It's only somewhat recently that's kind of settled into a bit more normalcy. Mostly due to Pereira. Um, so heavyweight's still trying to shake that off, I guess, because good grief. This is where we are. Again, bitterly disappointing, terrible way to end a pay-per-view. Something that apparently the UK crowd had to pay extra for, and normally the UFC events in the UK are part of one of their like cable packages. I think it's Sky Sport, but don't quote me. They might have changed. It might have changed since then. They might be something different now. But if you pay for this tier, this provider, you just get the UFC stuff, including pay-per-views. But they made you pay extra for this one. This is what you got. So that's got to be terrible. Um, yeah, just terrible. Really bad luck all the way around. Really bad for everyone. Like no one benefits from this. So yeah, we'll see what's up with Aspinall. He um got like put out on his YouTube, him getting checked out at the hospital in Abu Dhabi. He's gonna go get more stuff done in the UK. Doesn't seem like there's any permanent damage right now, but fingers crossed on that one. So yeah, we'll just have to wait and see. And I think just kind of the last thing on this to sort of harp back on the notion that you should just fight through getting poked in the eye or anything else. As I mentioned, I'm perfectly okay with the fact that there is a little bit of a gray area here where any competitive endeavor, and especially combat sports, you have to be able to overcome adverse conditions. You really do. And I am not going to sit here behind my keyboard and say that Tom Aspinall is a quitter, because I don't think he is. I think if you get poked in the eye and you can't see, you shouldn't fight. It's not complicated. I understand where the sentiment comes from that this is a very physical business. It's not pleasant. And if you wind up in a position where every bit of adversity causes you to fold like a lawn chair, we got a problem. I don't think that's what happened here with Tom Aspinall. I mean, look, I'm not in the position to lecture anyone about what to do to overcome physical impairments in some of this stuff. I mean, for crying out loud, I turned 40 this year, and that's kind of the point at which, boy, I really should not have sat in that position for as long as I did. Now my back's out of whack. Really starts to settle in for a guy. In fact, mine is a little bit out of whack at the moment, and I've got to go see a chiropractor about it. I'm pretty sure it feels similar to something I had on the other side of my lower back a while ago. I mean, a while ago. And hopefully this time I can get in before it becomes debilitating, because, boy, the last time I had this problem, it got real bad. Like, boy, I can't get out of bed bad. Like, do some funky maneuvering, because just sitting up was not happening. So, anyway, not that you care about my physical ailments. Um, so I'm not gonna accuse Aspinall of malingering, of looking for a way out. Dude, if you fighting Cyril Gahn is bad enough. Trying to fight Cyril Gahn with one eye. I mean, Gabriel Varga mentioned, I'd rather fight with one hand than one eye. You know, um, which I have not a thing I've given a lot of thought to. But would you rather fight with one hand tied behind your back? Would you rather fight with one eye being like blacked out, eye patch or whatever, so you can't use one eye? I don't know which of those is worse. I'm sure some weird YouTube channel that tests this kind of thing will do something with that, and God bless them if they do. I'll watch. But that's a little bit, for whatever it's worth. The fact that MMA has sort of fostered this environment where fouls are not a penalized thing for the most part, and fighters have a pathological self-belief anyway, sort of a prerequisite for success. You just get this position where the default assumption is it doesn't matter what's going to happen. You fight until you are stopped. And I don't think that's very healthy. I I am completely okay with a fighter who gets fouled, especially around the eyes. Look, if you kind of get kicked in the groin, and again, I mean kinda, and decide, no, I just want out, I might have something to say. But, but if you like take a bad groin shot, dude, I'm not going to knock anybody who winds up going, nope, this is not a thing that can continue at this point. I don't like Cedricus Dumas as a general rule. I didn't insult him one bit a little bit ago when he took a bad kick to the groin and literally couldn't stand afterwards. Like, what are you supposed to do with that? I'm going to insult the guy? Maybe if he was just doing some elaborate mime routine and it turns out he's fine. I mean, I watched what happened. It wasn't fine. He wasn't faking. You take a bad kick to the groin? No. I don't expect you to have to fight through that just for the sake of what? The fans? Fans don't care about you for the most part. They want to see violence. The promoter, the backlash and whatnot is not your problem. The promoter's job is the promoter's job. You owe them nothing but what you are contractually obligated to give them. That's whatever promotional work you're going to do, making weight and getting in the cage. Tom Aspinall did all that. Like, his responsibility to the UFC ends when that fight starts. Ugh. So I'm not mad at him. I'm really not. The UFC's not going to do anything about this. We had some strong officiating calls in this card. Seems a lot of people heard the criticism over the last last week and change, especially the last week, about what's been going on with officiating. Because again, there were some points taken fairly quickly in some earlier fights, and we'll get to those when we get to them. Yeah. So, not much else to say. We'll see what happens. We don't know fully what's up with Tom Aspinall yet. Hopefully nothing serious, and we'll just see what winds up happening. Heavyweight is a bad division. Like, everything about it's pretty bad at the moment, and this being the kind of unfortunate conclusion to a night when there were two other heavyweight fights, and sort of a general theme here was, let's get this division moving properly again. No, it's not. No, it's not. Anyway, speaking of getting a division moving properly again, in the co-main event, Mackenzie Dern defeats Virna Jandiroba via unanimous decision. 149-46, 248-47s to win the vacant strawweight belt. Live, I was 50-45 Dern. However, by the time the fifth round closed, I reconsidered my position. I know I got round 2 wrong. And I think round 3 or 4 was close enough that if you gave that one to Jandiroba, I'm not up in arms over it. But man, what to say about this fight? If this was a generic fight night main event, we all would have been okay. The fact that it's supposed to be for the belt, and was for the belt, like this is supposed to crown the best strawweight, it did not feel like that. Did not live up to that expectation of excellence. As for the fight, Mackenzie Dern's jab worked pretty well, busted up Jandiroba's right eye. Jandiroba got takedowns. Didn't do a whole lot with them, though. She got outstruck on the mat by Mackenzie Dern, who was on her back most of the time. Dern's guard is interesting a little bit. The fact that she, in this instance, kind of abandoned closed guard to throw strikes from her back to make sure it's known, like, hey, I'm still doing damage here. I'm still winning this exchange. and forced Jandiroba to do something, worked in her favor. Um, she wound up on top briefly, and Dern on top is actually pretty good. Her passing game is good. Her threat, she's worked on her ground and pound. Her takedowns are just still not great, is the big problem. Jandiroba just, again, couldn't do anything with the takedowns she did get. She had quite a few. She had a fair amount of top control time, but couldn't really pass and couldn't really mount any offensive damage. She did land some punches, mostly on the feet, though. Like when they would get into that position, both women would land, but Dern just did a little bit more blitzing, did a little bit more jab work, just kind of in general did a little bit more the whole way through. So the UFC finally can put the belt on Mackenzie Dern. She won this fight fair and square. And what I'm about to say needs to be understood in that context. Jandiroba was the deserving number one contender. She had the longest winning streak. She would have been next for Zhang Weili if Zhang stuck around. And Dern just beat her cleanly. No controversy, no weirdness. Clean win. 4-1 is kind of where I landed. On reflection. 4-1 I think is the correct score. That's a solid win. A solid win over the other top contender. Fighting for a vacant belt. She is the champion. She deserves it under those conditions. Two things. Here's the big one. Watching this fight, is there any confidence that you could derive that either of these women would have posed a serious threat to Zhang Weili? Now, I know they wouldn't fight Zhang the same way they fought each other. I get it. I'm not saying this is like... You can't look at some of the choices made in this fight and go, they would make the same choices against Zhang. Zhang's not the same fighter. Not every bit of that is going to be the same. But in general, did either of them have a chance against Zhang Weili? I mean, the answer is no, for the record. Jandiroba gets hit way too much. Dude, if Mackenzie Dern is hitting you this often, Zhang's going to end you. She had power at 115. And for Dern, if you're getting taken down that often, dude, you can't do that against Zhang. Zhang's actually got strong top game and good ground and pound. So this division's in a bad spot. I mean, who's Dern going to defend against? Tatiana Suarez, who just had a fairly lackluster outing against Zhang? Like, strawweight used to be the division that was good. I'm very grateful that I got to live through the era briefly when like Joanna and Rose and Zhang all kind of overlapped. Like there was some good stuff there from those three and from a few others. Like Jessica Andrade had some good fights during that time period. I mean, we can go on, but look at where it is now. It's just not very good. So we'll see if Dern can like help inject some life into it. But I don't know. I mean, partway through this fight, the crowd started singing for Tom Aspinall. That's how much they cared about what's going on here. They were just like, hey, the main event, remember? Yeah. Really disappointed the more I think about it with Jandiroba here. Dude, you had to dog your way to this title fight. Like you were in the trenches. You had a big win streak. That's what it took to get you here. You're not a promotional favorite. You're 37. You're probably not getting this shot again. And some of the decision making and some of the choices, like you got a bunch of takedowns. Why did you throw so little? Just you let yourself get outstruck from the bottom. Poor decision making. Poor. Anyway, moving on. Bantamweight Umar Nurmagomedov defeated Mario Bautista via unanimous decision, 30-27. Should have been 29-28. Bautista should have won the second round. He dropped Nurmagomedov that round with a head kick / knee. He did the more damaging stuff that round. He should have been rewarded for that, but Middle East. No issues with Umar winning rounds 1 and 3. Some good takedown work from him, some good mat returns, but a lot of like, hey, I got the back. Now I'm going to control from here for a long period of time. The shoot constantly meta game, especially at the lower weight classes, is what you do to win fights. It wastes time. Like it burns giant chunks of the round to just shoot. Oh, we hit the fence. Well, I'm still trying to do stuff, and then I'll get behind you, and I'll hold this. I'll do a little bit of damage, hit a mat return. That looks pretty good. Oh, you bounced up. Another mat return. Maybe this time I get the back for a little bit. Maybe hold the ride, throw a few punches. And just time bleeds away from the guy defending. And we finally got up and separated. Shoot again. That's somewhat labor intensive. Really is, but that's why the lighter weight classes are doing it. Bautista didn't make a bad account of himself. He had a gnarly toe hold actually in the first round. That Umar just kind of got his way through. Umar's lead leg, especially when he's southpaw, that right leg is... I am so jealous of that. Anyone who can just like stand in their normal stance, then pick up their lead leg and get it all the way to the head. My hips are a little bit messed up. I can't do that. Like, I can get waist. I can get to my waist. I can maybe get a little bit about, like, body-ish, like low body. I can get belt line. I can get legal belt line, for the most part. But if I want to get higher than that, I got to step. Like, I have to get some momentum going. And then I wind up, like, leaning more to get my leg higher instead of just raising it because, again, my hips are screwed up. So I'm super jealous of that. It's a very good weapon for him. Both guys landed some okay punches. He just mostly Umar outworked Bautista. If Bautista had been able to do more damage in rounds 1 and 3, I would have argued for him, much like I thought Volkov won. More on that in a minute. But if you're not able to do more damage than the other guy, then you wind up in a position where the more labor control style will be favored. Doubly so if you're fighting in the Middle East and are of the appropriate religion or part of the world. I just throwing that out there. Heavyweights, this fight sucked. Alexander Volkov defeats Jailton Almeida via split decision, 29-28. Not in dispute, rounds 1 and 2. Round 1 goes to Volkov, round 2 goes to Almeida. No dispute here. Round 1, Volkov gets taken down fairly quickly, but hits a kind of a half guard, slow motion sweep. And then when he's on top, he does damage. Drops elbows, lands some punches, does some okay work. Enough to win the round. Round 2, he can't do much off his back after getting taken down. Round 3, Almeida gets a takedown. Doesn't do much with it, gets stood up. Volkov grabs a clinch, lands some really nice body work. A couple of really nasty knees to the body that Almeida doesn't like. Almeida gets another takedown. Doesn't really pass guard, but gets a little bit around half guard at one point, but doesn't do anything. Round ends, and the brief bits of offense from Volkov that round were enough to win him the fight. I agreed with that, by the way. So here's the thing about Jailton Almeida at all, and especially in this fight. Jailton Almeida had a little over 10 minutes of control time in a 15-minute fight. That's a lot of control time. You're north of 2/3, a little bit. And he landed 9 significant strikes all fight. If you have 10 minutes of control time and land less than 1 significant strike per minute, what are we doing here? That is pathetic. That is pathetic. Look, Almeida's grappling, especially for a heavyweight, super good. His takedown game is actually respectable. His passing is good. His ability to get to positions is good. But he refuses to throw strikes on the ground. Like, just straight up seems to not do it. Remember all that time he had against Derek Lewis? Like, Derek Lewis rolled to his stomach several times and kind of did corpse guard from there because Almeida was, like, not even really sitting on him looking for hooks. He was kind of standing, squatting low, and, like, all right, throw a few iffy punches towards the head. Like, he won the fight anyway because Derek Lewis not good at this point. But his ground and pound Almeida's is just, I mean, to the extent that it exists, it's terrible. If you can avoid being submitted by him, like, he can't do anything other than try to hold a control position and wait out a round. Just bad. It's just bad. Volkov, had there been a actual conclusion to the main event, you could argue Volkov should be next, even though Aspinall beat him in fairly short order the first time. I don't know. Heavyweight's just a mess. Almeida, look, part of the problem is he's fighting like a few of the heavyweights who don't suck out loud. If he was fighting Walter Walker or guys like Walker's fighting, more on him later, he'd probably have several rear naked choke finishes by now. A couple of arm bars probably to his credit as well. But he's fighting a couple of the guys. He got to the point where he's fighting a few of the guys who know how to properly defend. And, I mean, Derek Lewis kind of did to him Curtis Blades did to Almeida, kind of what Derek Lewis did to Curtis Blades. Dropped the first round pretty badly. Then, while the guy is shooting in again desperately in the second round, caught him with an uppercut. Who's the other guy that Almeida lost to recently? No, he's won the last couple. Yeah, he technically stopped Sergey Spivak with strikes, but that was such a weird fight. Yeah, he choked out Romanov, but Romanov was just happy, like, hey, let's tie up, and then he went, aha. And Romanov was also like, it's a weird dude. Again, like his ground and pound is just, especially here, like he'd rather hold position for long stretches than risk losing it to land anything. If you look at the guys who are really good at ground and pound, there's a few of them. Fedor was good at it. Khabib was really, really good at it. Shogun, actually. People always remember him for like the tornado kicks and the flashy stuff. Rewatch Shogun's career, like actually in some detail. Dude was a phenomenal ground and pounder. I mean that sincerely. So there's some guys you can look at. You have to be okay losing position. Just okay, I'll get back to it, and I'll then do more damage. And Almeida's just like, nope, I will not give up this position. I will plant my flag here, and we will wait until intervention. And that's a really good way to go about competition jiu-jitsu. That's all about slow cooking. Well, not all, but mostly. That you can't do that in MMA. You don't have enough time. The structure and whatnot just doesn't favor it. And kicking off the main card, Azamat Mirzakhanov TKO'd Alexander Rakic, 3:11 of the first. Just timed Rakic coming in. They were opposite stances. Mirzakhanov caught him with a right jab. Dropped him, finished him. Mirzakhanov, pretty legit at light heavyweight. Not the biggest guy for the weight class, but fast hands, good power. He's got at least one knockdown in all of his UFC fights, so, Someone that might have a little bit of like, hey, something to watch at light heavyweight, which is in short supply these days. On the prelims, Quillan Salkeld punctuated basically the entire event, because it was kind of downhill after this, with a gnarly head kick knockout of Nasrat Haqparast. I mean, gave me the Crow Cop vibes. Now, granted, he's orthodox and Crow Cop was southpaw, but Salkeld tries a few weird takedowns that Haqparast easily defends. But yeah, Salkild just, all right, we're opposite stances. He'd poked the body a few times with like front kicks and one or two round kicks. Nothing serious. Again, it was 230. But shown it enough that then suddenly, oh, it comes high. Bang. Hack Parast down. Flips over onto his belly. Leg starts quivering. Man, he was out for a while. The camera was actually on Salkild as he got done celebrating, turned over and looked, and Hackparast is still stiff as a board. And you could see his face go from, yay, I just got something on my highlight, the kind of thing that everyone wants, to, oh, please don't let me have killed this man. Yeah, watching his face change for that. Oof. But, Salkild might actually, he's done pretty good work thus far, and Hackparast is not an easy guy to get out of there. I mean, he hadn't been stopped since 2020 when Drew Dober got him. And Dober, that time had serious power. He got triangled in his professional debut, but, not going to hold that too much against him. So, good win for Salkild. I think he said he wanted to fight someone ranked after this. Bit of a stretch. But he'll definitely get a bigger name if he doesn't get someone ranked. Middleweight, Ikram Alaskarov defeated Jun Young Park via unanimous decision, 30-27 across the boards. Park did kind of his thing. A lot of forward pressure, landed a few decent punches. He's hard to look good against. My affection for the Iron Turtle is fairly well known at this point. He's just a spoiler, and I say that as a compliment. He's hard to look good against. He's good about pressuring you. He's good about landing punches. He's got decent power. Had a really nice, more than once he caught Alaskarov with backed him to the fence, hit him with a left to the body, right over the top. Classic. Alaskarov just landed enough punches and then got his wrestling working enough to get the win. Nothing special. Ludovic Klein defeated Mateusz Rebeshki via majority decision. 29-28, which, weird. Well, I shouldn't say completely weird, slightly weird. 28-27, I respect that one, and 28-28. So these two had a really good fight for 2 rounds. Klein bothered Rembeshki pretty regularly with the right hook, the right hand, because Klein's fighting southpaw. And he's busts up Rembeshki's face. Rembeshki just one of those guys apparently who gets marked up. His eyes get busted up every time. He bleeds every time. Some guys just, and that's the way they are. You can be really good and still have that problem, but some guys just have that problem. He's got it. But Klein starts to slow a little bit in the third, and Rembeshki doesn't, keeps pushing forward, gets a takedown, and on the takedown, apparently, Klein breaks his right ankle. They showed it on replay, and yeah, I can totally see that. Then Rembeshki's on top for the rest of the round, the vast majority of the round. A few different times, lands some really nice flurries, some really good elbows. Probably should have been a 10-8. Initially, my thought was 10-9, then I thought about it and went, no, that was a 10-8. So my score was 28-28. The judge who went 28-27 gave Klein a 10-8 second round. That is, I think, acceptable. Rembeshki got visibly wobbled more than once that round. And he got cut up more than usual. Like, there was a little bit of blood at the end of the first, but he got cut open in the second, and then actually got cut open with elbows from the bottom in the third, pretty, visibly. So you could either argue that Klein really should have had a 10-8 in the second, which I think is defensible, or that Klein's work from the bottom, again, he landed some pretty good elbows and cut Rembeshki up, that what he did there was enough to avoid a 10-8 in the third. I think either of those positions are understandable and defensible. This was your fight of the night. Deserved it. Good fight. Look it up if you missed it. Solid win for Klein. Hopefully not too badly injured. We'll have to wait and see. I don't think we've had an official update yet. At heavyweight, Walter Walker heel hooked Louis Sutherland, 124 of the first, and then called out Hamdi Abdelwahab, who fought earlier. Whatever. Genuinely whatever. The Walter Walker heel hook train rolls on. This was, what, 4 in a row? Which is the longest streak of continuous heel hooks and ties for most heel hooks overall with Husamar Palhares, who also had 5. It's bad heavyweights. Yeah, Walter Walker's gonna leg lock those guys who don't know as much what they're doing down there. I don't. It's a fun gimmick, but I don't actually care. Nathaniel Wood defeated Miguel Delgado via unanimous decision. I talked a little bit about this earlier. 29-28 across the board. I was 29-28 Delgado, but Delgado had a really good first round. Hurt Wood a couple of times. Busted his nose up. Really nice combination work, but gets dropped near the end of the first, which Wood kind of needed to regain momentum. Delgado just slows a little bit in the second. Enough still to win it, to my estimation, because Wood's offense, well, he definitely regained some momentum by the end of it. I don't think he did quite enough purely effectively to win it, but I'm not dying on that hill. And then the third round, I think, went to Wood. Delgado would just he'd slowed and he was still like repeating a lot of the same combinations, so Wood had kind of a read on him at that point. Fun little fight here, actually. If not for Klein and Rimbeski, I think this would have been fight of the night, but Delgado also missed weight, so, At heavyweight, Hamdi Abdelwahab defeated Chris Barnett via unanimous decision, 29-26, and then 2 29-27s. If you're wondering how that happened, 10-8s, which you could give Abdelwahab and I wouldn't complain. And he was also deducted a point in round 1 for elbowing Chris Barnett square in the back of the head. Good on the ref. That was Mark Goddard in this instance. Just said, nope, we're not doing this. That's a point. And was correct to do so, I think. Look, Chris Barnett, his athleticism's kind of gone. His knees are shot a little bit at this point. Abdelwahab kind of sucks. Was just like, hey, takedown, and then I'm going to hold. He got stood up multiple times because he just was not doing anything offensive. Yeah, again, you want to do Walker and Abdelwahab, fine. I don't care much about either of them. Flyweight, allegedly, Mitch Raposo defeated Azat Maksum via unanimous decision, 30-26 and 2 29-27s. If you're wondering what happened there, Maksum was deducted a point in the third round for grabbing the fence and pulling himself out of a really bad position. The referee in this case was Rich Mitchell, and he was not having that. So in the third, Raposo gets a takedown. It's against the fence, near the fence. They kind of scramble around. He winds up on top. Technically mount, one-armed guillotine kind of going, and Maksum grabs the fence, uses it to pull and kind of hip heist to get on top. And the ref immediately went, stop, nope. You use the fence grab to change the position. Especially if you're like on the fence, your fingers might just kind of get pushed through it. That happens. It really does. It's a byproduct of a lot of different things. If you actually grab to stop being pulled over, that should be a point, my opinion. If you grab and pull to move the position, absolutely should be a point. So fully in support of the ref here. Fully in support. Good job, ref. Maksum just kind of struggled to get his wrestling really going, and Raposo just kind of outworked him for the most part. Wasn't terribly memorable. And kicking everything off, Mizuki Inoue scored a pretty big upset over Jacqueline Amorim. Unanimous decision, 230-27, 129-28. Inoue just was prepared to stop all of Amorim's takedowns, beat her up in the clinch. Nice body work at times. Solid return from Inoue, who'd been out of action for a bit. Yeah, her MMA career is weird. And she's taken some unfortunate time off at different points. Like, she debuts in the UFC in 2019 with a split decision over Wu Yanan. Fights about a year later, loses to Amanda Lemos at strawweight. Doesn't fight again until 2023 when she beats Hannah Goldie. Doesn't fight again until 2025. Like, again, some of it's injuries, some of it's other things, but I think a lot of it has been her trying to work on her skills at least, but I don't know that if she can stay active, she might be able to do a little something, but she can't take another like 2 years off before fighting if she wants to have momentum. Anywho, that was the card. Bonuses, fight of the night was Klein and Rembeshki, as mentioned. Performances went to Walter Walker and Quillen Salkild. Given that there were a whopping 3 finishes on the entire card, okay, Mirzakhanov got left out in the cold because one was a heel hook that continued a streak and was a heavyweight, and the UFC's desperate about that. And the other was a knockout of the year contender. That head kick from Salkild was, oof, nasty. Full report, MMAZona411mania.com. Y'all know that by now, so go give that a read if you're so inclined. I appreciate it. All right. Let's get moving on to the next one then, shall we? UFC on ESPN Plus 120. For crying out loud. There we go. Okay. So we are back in the warehouse. Sorry, 121. Said 120, meant 121. We're back in the warehouse for this one, and this is a terrible card. I straight up can't find anything about this card that I am actually excited about. Main event, Steve Garcia and David Onama. Onama had a little bit up and down early in his UFC career, recently on a 4-fight winning streak. Wins over Gabriel Santos, that was a finish. Then decisions over Jonathan Pierce, Roberto Romero, and Giga Chikadze. So, seems to be finding his footing. Steve Garcia went 1-2 in his first 3 UFC fights. Lost to Luis Pena, lost to Mahashate. Hasn't lost since. Beat Chase Hooper, beat Shailen Erdenbeke, beat Melquiades Alcosta, beat Sungwoo Choi, beat Kyle Nelson, beat Calvin Kattar. He's looked real good since returning to featherweight, which was the Hooper fight. Garcia's pretty good. Onama's not bad, but I think Garcia's probably more well-rounded. See if I can get this to load. I'm going with Garcia. I'm not going to be shocked if Onama pulls that off, but I've just been a little bit more impressed generally with what Garcia does. And this is the closest we're getting to an interesting fight, I think. So after that, we've got heavyweights, Ante Delia and Waldo Cortez Acosta, and I could not possibly care less about anything Salsa Boy does. Waldo Cortez Acosta is just furniture to me. Never been impressed with what he's done. Never been all that interested. Delia had a pretty solid UFC debut. Because he beat... Who did he stop? Tabora, right, which is not an easy thing to do. Not impossible, but not easy. I don't really pick Cortez Acosta to win fights. I mean, he can. It's hardly like he's some, bum. But he's won a few decisions that I did not think he won. And I'm not seeing much of a reason to think otherwise about this one. So, I'm going with Delia. Why are you not loading? this one. All right, something is up over there. Okay, yeah, here's my odds. Okay, odds for the record are with Steve Garcia a little bit. Fair enough. They're leaning D'Elia, but that's almost a pick 'em. Understandable. Okay. Moving on. Welterweight, Jeremiah Wells and Timba Garimbo. Don't really care. Wells is 38. 2-fight losing streak to Carlston Harris and Max Griffin. He's plenty athletic. Pretty decent power, but, been a minute since he finished anyone. Garimbo, somewhat lanky. Coming off a loss to Vicente Luque. He had a 4-fight winning streak before that. Granted, lower level of opposition. Takashi Sato, Pete Rodriguez, Ramiz Brahimaj, and Nico Price. Odds are a little bit with Garimbo. I expect a lot of circling from Wells, some blitzes. The question is whether or not his blitzes can actually, close the show. He's not the multifaceted threat that Luque was to kind of find that. And Luque didn't exactly have the easiest. He was in some danger before he found that. I'll go with Garimbo there, sure. Respect the odds. Next to featherweight, Isaac Dulgarian and Yadier Delvai. So Dulgarian 7-1. Coming off of a win, 2-1 in the UFC, beat Francis Marshall, lost to Christian Rodriguez, beat Brendan Marat. That was a decent win. Been over a year though. That was September of last year. Delvai undefeated, 9-0. Solid UFC debut actually over Connor Matthews. Okay, this fight doesn't suck. I'm not going so far as to say good fight, but doesn't suck, which will be among the better things that can be said about the fights on this card. Odds like Dulgarian. Delvai is, I think, more of a boxing guy. Dulgarian, more of a wrestler. Got really good ground and pound, actually. Can see why the odds are with him. I'm going to go with Dulgarian, but I'm going to asterisk this one. I want to rewatch Delvai's UFC debut. Maybe see some of his pre-UFC stuff, see if there's anything I can glean from that. Welterweight next, Charles Radke and Daniel Frunza. I put his names together for Danunza. Radke coming off of a loss. He's 2-2 in the UFC, 3-2. He lost to Carlos Praches. He beat Matthew Semmelsberger, which doesn't mean much these days. Coming off a loss to Mike Malott, which not the worst loss in the world, but also if you're good, you should probably beat him. Frunza, Romanian. Dropped his UFC debut to Reese McKee. Oh, that was a doctor stoppage. I forget what it was. I think one of his eyes got messed up. Odds like Radke a little bit. I'll respect that. Radke's I don't think he's got the highest upside that you'll ever find, but he's got decent power, kind of a hard-nosed attitude. So I don't know that Frunza has the oomph to back him off the way you kind of need to. Flyweights next, Alon Nascimento and Cody Durden. Poor Cody Durden. He's in a rough spot. Nascimento is a big flyweight. 21-6. He had weight issues his last time. Yeah, in the Filio fight, he missed weight. He dropped his UFC debut to Tiger Ulanbekov via split decision, but 3 in a row since then. Jake Headley, Carlos Hernandez, and the aforementioned Jafel Filio fight. Had a bunch of fights fall out. Fight with Jake Headley, Malcolm Gordon, Tim Elliott, Sumu Darji, Filio, Almabayev, Estevam. Yeah, that guy struggled to actually get fights. Durden, 2 fight losing streak. Lost to Joshua Van and Jose Ochoa. Only 1-4 in his last 5, actually. The other 2 losses coming to Ulanbekov and Bruno Silva. He did hit Matt Schnell with that ninja choke, but he has struggled in that first round a little bit. It was a nice choke to finish. It really was, but Nascimento actually might have some upside at this point, and I think Durden's a little bit more playing out the clock. Looking for the odds. And do I not have odds for this particular fight? Hang on. Vieira, Monse, yada yada yada. Alright, hang on. Oh, there you are up now. Let's see. Just talking about Cody Durden. Okay. This is a recent addition or something? Jeez. I mean, it should be fairly obvious in the way I was talking about it. I'm going to go with Nascimento, but I'd like to find the odds just to at least tell you guys kind of what that one's looking like. And I don't see any. Huh. Alright. Well, nothing I can do about that one. Anyway, going with Nascimento. Spell that properly. Thank you. Going with Nascimento, so that's where I am on that. Okay, light heavyweight next. Oh, why? Billy Elicana and Kevin Christian. They could shut down light heavyweight. No one would really care. Elicana 8-2. What? 1-2 in the UFC. 1-1. Lost to Bogdan Gushkov and then beat Ibo Aslan. That was a pretty terrible fight. Christian 9-2. This is his UFC debut, I believe. Yeah, 6-fight winning streak, coming off a Contender Series fight. Again, not super impressed with Elicana. Don't know how I feel about Christian, though. The odds are with Elicana. I'll just respect the odds. I don't know enough to have a super strong opinion one way or the other there. Bantamweight, Timmy Kwamba and Chung Ho Lee. All right. So Kwamba 9-3. 1-2 in the UFC. Lost to Balaji Oki and Lucas Almeida, then beat Roberto Romero. All right, that's respectable. Chung Ho Lee 11-1. You have a nickname? I don't think he does. Looks familiar. 2-0 in the UFC. Got a split decision win over Xiaolong and beat Cortavius Romeus earlier this year. Okay. My hunch is to go Lee here. Kwamba's not bad, but he's, as mentioned, he's had some struggles. Odds are a little bit leaning Kwamba. I'm going to stick with my gut there and go with Lee. So I'm just prepared to be wrong about that. Middleweight, Dante Johnson and Cedricus Dumas. Oh, God, why? So Johnson is 6-0. This is his UFC debut. He has finished all of his opponents in the first round. That's actually not a super I don't take a lot of confidence in that, but I also don't think Cedricus Dumas is going to be the guy to really like mess with that. So I'm going with Johnson. Yeah, odds are big with Johnson. Completely understandable why. Okay. Uh, Bantamweight, women's bantamweight, Ketlin Vieira and Norma Dumont. Just why again? Vieira coming off a win over Macy Chasson. Been trading wins and losses for a little bit. Dropped a split decision to Raquel Pennington that could have gone her way. Beat Penny Kianzad. Got mopped by Kayla Harrison. She didn't get finished, so there's that, but she won like no part of that fight. Dumont, pretty decent winning streak between both featherweight and bantamweight. She's what, 5? Yeah, beat Danielle Wolf, Carol Hossa, Chelsea Chandler, Jermaine Durandamy, and Irene Aldana. This division sucks, so it needs some kind of help. Momentum's a bit with Dumont. Vieira tends to win these kind of fights, though. Odds are close, but yeah, they're with the fighter with momentum. Hmm. I need to see these two next to each other. For the sake of a pick here, I'll go with Dumont, but I'm giving that one an asterisk too. Because it's late slash early, and I don't want to look up a couple of things related to that. So I will later. Strawweight next, Alice Ardelian and Montserrat Ruiz. Golly. So Ruiz is actually like too small for this weight class. She's 5 foot even. Might be a generous read of her height even. 61 inches of reach, 1-3 in the UFC. She won her UFC debut against Cheyenne Vlismas, but held like Kesagatami for long periods of time and did nothing with it. 3-fight losing streak since then. Amanda Lemos, Jacqueline Amorim, and Eduardo Mora. Yeah, she's just not very good. And Ardelian is 1-1 in the UFC. 1-2. Lost her first two. Dropped a split decision to Shauna Bannon that I thought she won. Lost to Melissa Martinez. That was much cleaner. And then beat Hayani Dos Santos her last time out. Given the size difference, because Ardelian is a decent-sized strawweight. I'm going with her. I kind of don't pick Ruiz to win fights at this point. Next is what? Phil Rowe and Hyun Ko. Sorry, I always forget that. Tapology knows how to properly list those names. So Phil Rowe, real up and down guy. That Phil Rowe, 11-5. 4-3 in the UFC. Hang on. Had some weight issues when he fought Orion Cossie and Nico Price. Those might have been welterweight fights. Then lost to Neil Magny, lost to Jake Matthews. Those were definitely welterweight. Beat Angelosa. I think that was his move to middleweight. Oh, no, we're still at welterweight. Sorry. So he just struggled with weight. Seems to have it under control now, at least. So there's that. Whereas Ko, is this the Korean Tyson? 12-2. Yeah, this is the Korean Tyson. Beat Oban Elliott in his UFC debut, which was actually quite impressive. I'm moderately high on Elliott, and Ko handled him. I'm going with Ko. Look, Rowe is not a bad fighter, but I've also never been like super impressed with him, if memory serves. And kicking everything off at strawweight again, we have Talita Alencar and Ariane Carnelose. Let's see. Alencar 6-1-1, 2-1 in the UFC. She beat She beat Heine Dos Santos, lost to Stephanie Luciano, then beat Vanessa Demopoulos. Okay, that's fine for your first few fights in the UFC. Carnelose 15-3, 3-2 in the UFC. She's been out of action, hasn't she? Yeah. Oh, and her last win was weird. So she loses her UFC debut to Angela Hill when there's a doctor stoppage due to a cut, which was fair actually. That was a cut if memory serves. Rebounds with a couple of wins over Liang Na and Estela Nunes. Then loses to Lupe Godinez. Then takes like 2 years off. Fights Piera Rodriguez last year and wins when Rodriguez gets DQ'd for headbutting. Which I was okay with that ruling by the ref, for the record. The first time they kind of just banged heads was one of those things that just kind of happens on the ground on occasion. Ref told them both, like, hey, watch it. Then Rodriguez just does it again. And the ref at that point goes, no, stupid. So that was May of last year. So again, been out for a bit. She had a fight with Loma Lukbunmi fall through. So the lack of activity there's a little bit of a problem. If you're getting taken down by Piera Rodriguez, I have to imagine Alencar will likely be able to do something similar. So I'll go with Alencar. And that's where we stand right now. So Saturday, MMAZone411mania.com. Y'all know the drill there. Go give it a follow and read along. I appreciate it. All right, I'm going to be quick looking through the old social medias because it's late and I've suddenly become very tired. So I will check for news. If there's nothing there, we will do plugs and get out of here. All right, nope, I don't see anything new there, so let's get into plugs. Monday, probably when you are listening to this. Technically when it's being recorded at this point. Yay me. I suck. On Damn You Hollywood, we will be reviewing the Bruce Springsteen biopic, Deliver Me From Nowhere. Mark loved it. I'm going to either hate it or have no opinion because nothing about this speaks to me at all. Haven't seen it yet, so I'm reserving judgment. That's just my reasonable guess based on how I've reacted to every other musician biopic I've ever seen. So we'll see. Is there anyone else on that show? Not just me and Mark. Nope, just the two of us, I think. Unless that needs to be updated. Then just regular coverage. So Friday night, WWE SmackDown. Saturday, November 1st, UFC on ESPN Plus 121. And yeah, then we will be back here. We will review UFC on ESPN Plus 121, and we will preview, November as every week, okay? Pretty much. We will preview UFC on ESPN 73, still on the Apex. Your main event is Gabriel Bonfim and Randy Brown. Just no. Okay, can I find anything here? Adrian Yanez really Okay, I'm curious about the outcome of Yanez and Quinones. Yanez really needs to get back on the horse. Mayra Buena Silva and Jacqueline Cavalcante don't actually care. They're trying to push Cavalcante. And Buena Silva is just kind of a mess. Turned in a terrible effort in her title fight. Josh Hokett and Max Gimenez, terrible heavyweights. Oh, Tisha Pennington and Denise Gomes. Bleh, who cares? Luana Santos and Melissa Croden. Croden with a quick turnaround, actually. Jeez. She fought a couple of weeks ago. Marco Tulio and Christian Leroy Duncan. Okay, CLD being back. Moderate interest. Less than moderate, but not none. Mild. Very mild. Ricky Simone and Hani Barcelos. Respectfully, don't care that much at this point about either of them. They're both kind of washed. Jamal Emmers and Haider Amil. That'll probably at least be watchable. Okay. Ishmael Bonfim and Chris Padilla. Don't care. Muslim Salikov and Urosh Medic. Okay, there's one. I found one. Matt Schnell and Joseph Morales. Don't really care. And Robert Valentin and Jason McVeigh. That might be one of the lowest skill fights in modern UFC history. That card sucks. Good grief. This one coming up and that next one, terrible. Terrible cards on paper. Absolutely terrible. All right, but we'll preview it next week because I'm a professional. All right, that's it for me for this week. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. I appreciate it. Until next time, stay safe out there and continue to be well, be safe, and behave.